Alpha News broadcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hooten. Today we're very fortunate to be joined by Dr. Neil Shah, a candidate who is running for governor as of about 2 months ago here in Minnesota. Dr. Shah owns a dermatology practice that services hundreds of Minnesota patients and has thrown his hat in to replace Governor Walz. Dr. Shah, thanks for being with us.
Pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Absolutely. So right off the bat, let's just get the viewers acquainted with who you are as a person. So you're a physician.
Yep, so I'm a dermatologist by trade and father of 3 young kids, 8, 6, and 4 years old, married a Minnesota girl, so that means you don't get to leave Minnesota.
Yep.
I was born and raised around Chicago. I'm the son of Indian immigrant parents who came here 50 years ago. And I moved to Minnesota in 2003 to attend medical school at the U, did my residency at Mayo, started my practice about 9 years ago, and we live just north of St. Paul.
You've been here for a pretty long time.
For a long time, since
'03.
'03, yeah. And it's been great. You know, the traditional small business story started with 1 clinic. I was the only doc there, 5 employees. Now we're, 35 employees and 6 PAs and myself, and cover 6 clinics in the Northwest Metro.
Well, there's our easy bridge into politics. What's it been like, first of all, being in medicine over the last year and a half, and second, having all these employees depend on you for their income?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, and that's a lot of why I'm here today. We were growing at a great clip before COVID hit, and then COVID attacked, and in the beginning, no one knew what to do, right? So you take a knee, you look around, where are things going? Then you got to try to survive. I was actually on my first vacation in 9 years in the Dominican, and I got this, this whole thing blew up literally in the middle of March.
Yeah.
And there was a big race to get out, and my office manager's calling me and saying, like, look, 50 people are dropping their appointments per day. What do you want to do? How are we going to do this? And everyone's just running around. No one knows how bad the disease is. No one knows how we're going to adapt to it. So
I remember that. I mean, in the early days, we didn't know what was going on.
We really didn't
had to act
know.
with caution because we just didn't know.
That's right. And so, you get back here, and I remember my toughest day as a professional was furloughing half my staff. And, no one really knows what that's like if you've never owned a business. I mean, if you've only worked for somebody else, the pain of going up to someone who's given you years of work and who has a family to feed and who has a mortgage to pay and saying, I'm sorry, I can no longer employ you, it's incredibly painful. And then it became more clear that this was self-inflicted. We got more data. By May, it was pretty clear that, well, there's overwhelming survival to this, for younger folks. And by June, certainly it was like, what are we doing stopping medical practices from having, elective care? I mean, there's no kind of elective medical care. If your knee really hurts, you need to get your knee fixed.
Exactly.
And, you need your screening mammograms and colonoscopies and skin exams.
No one's having recreational doctor's appointments.
Yeah, there's no recreational skin checks, no.
Yeah.
And so, we rebounded from that. We brought all of our employees back, and then the back half of the year was tough. We'd see people with delayed cancer diagnoses, giant tumors that would have been more easily operable on a nose. Most of what I do is skin cancer and reconstructive surgery, and that's like, man, 6 months ago, this thing would have been tiny, and now it's like I'm fixing half your nose. And, and then it was a segue into like Joe Biden's economy. I mean, the Biden-Walz economy is one of early stagflation, and so we're growing. We have jobs, pay great, but no one wants to work. If you're getting paid more for sitting home than working, and this is every single business where around where our business is. They can't hire anyone for any amount of money to work. And so, we're trying to grow, we're trying to navigate all this, we're trying to take the best care of our patients. And, it just became clear to me that the career political class had no interest in the struggles of everyday business owners. And I looked at who we were going to run on our side and said we're going to lose again. And I looked at Walz and I was like, we can't definitely not do more of this. So, it's time for a different candidate who's going to run a different game plan. And, when ordinary men and women start throwing tea into the harbor, things are bad.
Exactly.
And I think that's where we're at as a country.
Yeah. So you're a regular guy who was on the front line of COVID, who owns a small business, who's been in Minnesota for a long time. And there's a lot of reasons for you to get involved in politics. But I understand some people might be concerned about your lack of political experience.
Right.
Sort of describe the process for me of becoming a politician, because that's what you seek to
Well,
become.
yeah. Well, I hope to never become a politician, but I hope to serve and then go
you
back
go.
to my business.
There you
So
go.
people are like, well, gosh, what experience do you have? And I'm like, well, experience capitulating to the radical left. I don't have any experience doing that. Making the sausage in St. Paul, I don't want experience doing that.
Right.
I have experience starting and growing a business. I have experience, raising 3 kids. I have experience understanding what it's like to live in a highly regulated, economy, and watching neighborhoods burn and watching our schools get progressively worse. And that's my experience. I've served as an executive on a number of, specialty medical societies, and so I have a lot of executive experience. And you can always have your chief of staff and the people around you help understand the political climate. But really, I don't think we should be selecting for people who've chosen politics as a career. Politics is service. It is not a job. And so you do it for some time, and then you go back to your farm. That's how it used to be, and that's the way.
Greeks and the Romans.
That's exactly right. Everyone should serve for some period of time, and then you go back and you realize that it's service. And so, we need to select for people, men and women who have a day job, men and women who want to do something for a while because they feel like they have a skill set to do that well, to serve well, and then go back to something. If you find someone getting into politics who won't be able to get out of politics, that should be a red flag about that candidate.
Yeah, because there's a difference between being a politician and being a leader. And just because somebody doesn't have experience, putting on the suit and tie and going to make the sausage in St. Paul, as you say, doesn't mean they can't be a leader.
That's
a really
right.
good point.
That's right.
You touched on some political issues earlier, the COVID, the inflation, the economy. I want to talk about the economy. This is something we don't hear a lot of people talking about. There's sort of this anvil hanging over our heads right now with the inflation and all these things. What are your thoughts on that, and how would you lead Minnesota through whatever we encounter next?
Well, nothing good is coming. Joe Biden and Tim Walz have created an economy where 25%, and now more than that, of all dollars ever printed have been printed in the last year. Okay. Yeah. And people have been incentivized to not work. You have bizarre supply chain disruptions affecting every business at every level. For us, we can't even get injectable anesthetic, or it could be, I can't make a hot tub because I don't have band clamps. Like, it's a bizarre shortage of things in the world. And all of those are going to culminate in kind of a disastrous implosion in the economy. And it's just going to be a very, very rough patch because, the Fed's answer to all this is just print more money, which just blows up the bubble larger. And then when the bubble finally pops across all sectors, it's going to be really bad. So no one really wants to say that, but that doesn't change the fact that it's coming, and there's no underlying fundamentals to support the market valuations that are there right now. So what does that mean for everyday Minnesotans? It means we're staring at probably a stagflationary market. And for people who don't know what that is, it is a stagnant economy, so a contracting economy in the face of rampant inflation. And so Joe Biden and Jerome Powell have seen fit to print unlimited amounts of money and incentivize people to not work. And now you have this bizarre environment where you have, worsening unemployment claims in a situation where every single business is hiring. And hiring for our starting wage for an unskilled person to work our desk is $25 an hour.
No way.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So no one wants to work for that, plus a benefits package.
Wow.
And you've got gas stations. I saw one yesterday in Plymouth, $500 signing bonus, right? At a gas station, I've seen $3,000 to be a bus driver as a signing bonus. It's very concerning. So, Minnesota's economy is unique in the sense that we are extraordinarily diverse. We're essentially kind of an independent country in that we have mining, we have agriculture, huge industries, high-tech manufacturing, low-tech manufacturing, R&D, the best healthcare in the world, a great research institution. So, in all these service industries. So we're very diverse. So we won't get hit as hard as some other states that may be a single monolithic economy. Right. The problem is that we have a tax and spend predilection to this state. Yeah. So whether it's the fourth highest marginal rate in the nation, or a 13% death tax, or tax and cap gains like ordinary income, we've blown out the budget. In a decade, we've doubled our budget. And the argument in St. Paul between the so-called conservatives and the DFL is, do we increase the budget by $1 billion or $3 billion? That's not what the discussion should be.
Right. The Overton window has shifted so
It
far.
has. Yeah. And then you have folks running for governor patting themselves on the back. Well, I never did a tax increase. Well, yeah, but
what a decrease.
How about a decrease because you've increased the size of the budget by $12 billion in the last 6 budgets or the last 3 budgets? So It's nothing to be proud of, and everyone's voted for it. And so there's a significant amount of frustration, and I think in the state, people vote with their feet. So we almost lost our 8th congressional seat. You have business leaders, half the phone calls I make, I'm like, yeah, dude, I moved to Naples. It's like, okay. Yeah. And that's what we face. And once that gets going, you're going to go the Illinois, California, New York route, and you cannot it's so much harder to pull it back at that point. We're teetering on that brink.
Yeah. I don't think people realize how similar we are to California in terms of economics, because they used to be the golden state. They had a similar economy with a diverse array of industry, and then they implemented a lot of the same policies that we see here, and now it's California. I mean, it's almost an adjective at this point.
It's a good rule of thumb. If you're doing what California's doing,
you're
doing something wrong.
Absolutely. So we have the economy, we have COVID. One thing that we see in this race, of course, is going to be COVID as sort of a front-runner issue. What is your COVID plan moving forward?
Yeah, so COVID is a great exercise in why you can't have top-down governmental solutions to any problem. Thankfully, we're a federal republic. So you have all these states, the lab of the states to solve the problem, right? And there's a divergent recovery, kind of a K-shaped recovery where the red states have done very well and the blue states are doing increasingly poor. And that gap will continue to widen. The economic haves and have-nots based on governance choices. COVID itself, you have to allow individuals to make decisions. If you want to wear a mask and hide in your basement for the rest of your life, that's fine. I'm not going to pay for it, but you're free. It's a free country.
You can do that.
But you're not going to make my kids wear masks because there's no benefit to them doing that, and you're not going to force them to have reduced economic opportunities and educational and developmental opportunities because of your bizarre fears. So, we have this environment where we've got vaccines. You want one? Get one. They're highly protective. Once you've had one, it doesn't matter if no one else wants to get it around you. You derived a benefit from it. So it's this bizarre, they're like, Shah's anti-vaccine. No, I'm anti-mandate.
Big difference.
There's a big difference, right? So I think everyone should work out for an hour a day. I don't think the government should mandate that you work out for an hour a day.
Right.
And then people cry about externalities. Look, every time you drive your car to the store, it's an externality. You can hit a pedestrian and kill him, right? You ride your bike, that doesn't happen.
Right.
So we impose externalities on everybody every single day, and that's a part of being a society. In this case, the externality is about equivalent to driving your car to get your stuff. So, if you want the vaccine, get it. You don't want it, you shouldn't need to get it to participate in civil society.
Right. Society has a risk tolerance that we assume every single day.
You have to, right? If you want to engage in society, you're going to have some risk of getting hit by a light rail as you go to a Vikings game, or getting hit by a drunk driver. Any one of these, life isn't risk-free.
Or the large risk of getting shot in downtown Minneapolis.
that risk is approaching 1. So yeah.
Speaking of Minneapolis, if you were to become governor, what would your law enforcement strategy be?
Yeah, so people talk about, we need to do something to make our streets safe. Well, clearly, you need to have an appropriate amount of law enforcement personnel. They need to be trained correctly, in de-escalation tactics and any of those things that you're going to get any of those law enforcement professionals to agree with, okay? So, but I'm upset with the judiciary, right? You have black letter law saying the Minneapolis City Charter, you must have X number of cops, X percentage, okay? And judges refuse to hold anyone's feet to the fire.
Yeah.
And there's clearly a civil rights violation going on here. There's a lawsuit about this. But if you live in Minneapolis and your kids are getting shot simply for sitting on their porch, that is a violation of your civil rights. And the city council is guilty. The mayor is guilty. And they must be enjoined to enforce the actual city charter.
Right.
And the fact that the Justice Department refuses to do that is galling, in my opinion. So you can't lay all this at the feet of police officers. You have prosecutors who refuse to enforce the law. You have no cash bail, people beating somebody, getting out the same night, and then beating somebody again.
That literally happened.
Yes, well, it seems to happen every weekend.
Right.
So you can't put this all on the cops. You have to blame the judiciary. The prosecutors all deserve a part of this. And if the judicial branch wants to act in a partisan fashion, then they should run as partisan candidates.
Right.
So my solution to that problem is you tag them with a letter after their name. People will be more apt to pay attention to the backside of their ballot, and we will get judges who actually decide to follow the law.
Absolutely, and that's something the governor could do. This is very much.
You could definitely support legislation that would force them to run as a partisan. Yep.
Yeah, that's a unique solution. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So for those of us who are just tuning in, we're on with Dr. Neil Shah, who is running for governor in Minnesota. Of course, there are other people running for governor. We've got Benson, Gazelka, Jensen, 2 mics, and you. Where's the light between you and some of these other candidates, specifically between you and Dr. Jensen, who both have similar backgrounds?
Yeah, no, I think the biggest difference, it's you've got 3 career politicians running for this. I'm a businessman, father, and a physician. So you can look at voting records. You can look at how these other candidates have voted in the past, and they can say, gosh, I may believe this now, but it's hard for me to believe that someone believes in stand your ground or constitutional carry when you co-author universal background checks, right? So that's what Scott did. So, understanding why that is, you don't start a conversation about a God-given right. There's no conversation to be had. The Second Amendment is the second, or you end up like Australia.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, that's one where I just don't understand that kind of level of bizarreness. And then for all of them, it's like, well, why did you vote for these consistent increases in the size of our budget? There's no answer to that. Gazelka will tell a lie about I didn't increase taxes. That's untrue. They reinstated the sick tax, so by definition, on me, that's a tax that they all signed on to. So they increase taxes, they lie about it, but then mostly they've increased the size and scope of government. Right. And there'll be any amount of crying about like, well, gosh, it's really hard and this and that. No, you have a job to do. We're not playing defense. We do own the Senate, right. So you dig in your heels and you fight for something. Yeah. You don't just turn into Democrat light and allow them to just run roughshod over the Senate. You don't have to play nice. The DFL is not our friends. Yeah. This isn't talking to people who have been left by the Democrat Party, the moderates in the center who are like, I don't have a home. I'm a union, pro-life, kind of the folks who used to be a lot of the Democratic Party.
You see a lot of them up in Iron Range.
You do a ton. Yeah. And it's like the Democratic Party left them and became this radical leftist tool that wants to tear down America. And, I'm a conservative. I want to conserve America. I want to make America better. I haven't always liked what America's done, but I've always loved what America is. And that's where we need to get people back to. And that's a message that resonates with those center-left voters who may not agree policy for policy with everything I want to do, but want some sanity and good governance back there, and want people to stand up for individual freedom, for the Constitution, for their rights to just be left alone from government and just live their lives.
Looking at the left, especially the Minnesota left, I think you're correct that it's become almost Marxist in a lot of ways. What would your plan be to rein them back in? Do you think that there is a future where the left comes back to normal, or do you think it's just going to be continual departure?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be some fraction of the population you just can't reach. Yeah. And so on the left, I don't even think it's worth engaging with people who think America is systemically racist and needs to be destroyed. But there's a lot of folks, classical liberals, people that are center-left, moderate, independents, who are just tired of this constant vitriol from the left. It really is the tail wagging the dog. It's a small set of people who want to tear everything good about this country down. And it's our time to stand up. The silent majority can't be silent any longer. This is our state and our country. We need to take it back, and we need to restore constitutional principles, limited government, economic freedom and prosperity. The Marxists really have infiltrated education at every level. And that was the long game. They're a skilled opponent, and they're good at looking 100 years into the future and saying, how do we ruin this country? Right. You ruin their kids. Right. And that's what they've done. They've ruined our universities. They've ruined education at every level up. I'm a product of Reagan's public school system, okay? And back then, it was a Pledge of Allegiance every day, and you learned reading, writing, arithmetic, and you learned to be colorblind, and you didn't care.
Learn about critical race theory?
No, we didn't. We learned actual things. Actual science and math and social studies, and that includes the inconvenient periods in our history, right? You Dred Scott and slavery and the My Lai Massacre and all these things that we could have done better as a country. You learn all those. Right. Conservatives want to say, let's teach those, and let's teach how we overcame them to get to what the original founders of this country wanted, which was a constitutional republic with equality of opportunity. And every day we get better and closer to that ideal. But that was always the ideal. And so I have no tolerance for the Marxists that want to tear that down and tell lies about what this country is and what it ought to be. And my children won't be taught to hate people based on the color of their skin. They will be taught that you should love everybody, that you should judge people based on, are they friendly, are they unfriendly, are they hardworking, are they lazy, useful things. Not simply the color of their skin. And they won't be taught that you're a failure because of the color of your skin, or you're an oppressor because of the color of your skin.
Or that your success is owed only to the color of your skin.
That's exactly correct. Yeah. My parents came here. They were brown. They were different. They dressed odd. They ate different foods. And they clearly ran into racists in the time that they were here. But the system wasn't racist. They achieved everything they wanted to achieve because after the civil rights struggle, we had equality of opportunity. Now, does that mean when you sit down at the poker table, not everyone gets the same hand? Some people get a worse hand. You got to play a little harder to win. But in America, if you have talent and you work hard, you can achieve your dreams. And that's still true. And it'll be true as long as we push back on the left that wants to destroy that.
Absolutely. So you just inadvertently addressed one of our viewer questions. One of you asked how you would help to heal racial tensions in Minnesota. You handily answered that one. Another viewer question, do you support the legalization of marijuana?
So I believe in the decriminalization of marijuana as a first step that will give us ample data to continue to study it. I have a few concerns about it. I don't like that oftentimes legalization is used as a way to increase the size and scope of government because here's this new thing we can tax, and so let's tax it. I've taken care of patients who are wounded veterans, people with chronic pain, people abused by the modern medical industrial complex, placed on psychotropics, on chronic narcotics, and I've seen these people regain their lives through use of THC products. So it's hard for me to say that there's not a benefit potentially to those medications. And I don't think you need to go to a doctor to self-medicate. So from that standpoint, I think decriminalization is a great first step. It'll allow us to study it. I certainly do not think that children should be exposed, and I think we have serious issues to work out when it comes to driving while inebriated on any substance. But these are things we can sort out. We have other states that will be ahead of us in that, and that I think we get data from. The war on drugs has been disastrous. I think there's very little, and I'm a liberty guy, right? So you kind of know where I'm going to end up on this, and it's been disastrous. It's been disastrous for communities of color. We need to start to heal those wounds if we're going to move forward in a meaningful way.
Sure, absolutely. Abortion is another sort of key issue that I feel like we should just ask about
when
we have you in the studio. What's your stance on abortion?
Yeah, so I'm pro-life from conception, and I think if you crack open any embryology textbook, the definition of life is very clear. Okay, this is not a debatable thing. Life begins at fertilization. If you hit rewind on the videotape of your life, maybe I'm dating myself. You do these things that are called tapes, old people like me used to watch them. You rewind it, it always goes back to fertilization. And some of the arguments around, viability, I've always found is such a bizarre line of reasoning. A 2-year-old is not viable. Like if you drop dead in the house, and that 2-year-old can't take care of itself, it can't feed itself, it can't bathe itself, it will die. Right. At some age, maybe around 4, 5, 6, kids become viable in the sense they can survive alone by themselves outside the wound. But also, you're not viable when you're under anesthesia. You're not viable any number of potential times.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So in your life, in your humanity, your essence of being alive and being a human being does not diminish during those periods. So I've always thought that that's kind of a bizarre line of reasoning. So really, it's, women have absolute autonomy over their body, but it's not just their life to consider. There is another life there, and that life deserves a shot at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as well.
Absolutely. When it comes to attacking Governor Walz, we established the light between you and the other fields of Republicans, but what are you seeing as your main weapons in the battle against Walz if you were to get the nomination?
Yeah, so Tim Walz has let down every facet of Minnesota during his time here. He let neighborhoods I used to live in burn down. He's letting kids get shot in North Minneapolis, and he does not care. He refuses to stand up to the radical left in the same way that Joe Biden does and say enough. He could moderate himself at any time. He could say, hey, it's time to tack back to the center. It's time to, refund our police and all these things. But he won't. He's too afraid of them. It's the same reason he didn't deploy the National Guard when it could have made a difference. It's the same reason he let the 3rd Precinct burn down. Right. He's just a weak, ineffectual leader that could not shepherd us through COVID, respecting either people's ability to make decisions for themselves or businesses' ability to protect their clients. He shoved patients back into the nursing homes. He did the Cuomo, right? So he killed thousands of people by putting them in a place where they shouldn't have gone. And if you lack technical expertise, you lack the ability to stand up to your experts and say, well, why is it that I would do that, or what's the downside of that? The job of the executive isn't to do what Anthony Fauci tells you to do. Yeah. The job of the executive is to take disparate input, weigh the political cost, the economic cost, the lives cost, this and that, and come up and lead. That's what leaders do. And maybe you make the wrong answer, but at least there should be some underlying set of principles that animate your decision making. For me, it would be freedom and the Constitution. I'm always going to come back home to freedom and the Constitution. That is the rule book. That's the contract all Americans are bound by. Tim Walz has no central underlying ethical principles that guide his actions. So he's like an amoeba. He just this and then that, and then he responds to stimuli, particularly when he's squeezed by the radical left, and he won't stand up to them.
I think that's a very good summation of walls, because the far radical left, they know what their foundational principles are.
That's right.
Absolutely. Conservatives know what their foundational principles are, and then you have people like Walls that are just sort of tossed around in the waves, and whoever yells at them the loudest, I guess, gets their way.
That's right.
Yeah. So you've got another writing question here. What is your Minnesota health plan? For example, do you support ending MNsure?
So health plans are, generally speaking, all of healthcare is probably the largest swamp in the swamp. And everything that distorts the market is upsetting to that entire. So there's only two people that should matter in healthcare: the buyer and the seller.
Right.
The buyer is the patient, and the seller is the healthcare provider. Unfortunately, in that room, we have the third-party payers. We have the employers that pay the third-party payers because of a relic of wage freezes in World War II. And so you have this entirely distorted economy. And then on top of that, you have reinsurance being funded by the rhinos to distort the market even further and prevent people from seeing the actual cost of what the premiums are. Then you have mandates for what needs to be covered that are statutory. Unwinding all of that is well beyond what a single administration could do, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't chip at it. And generally speaking, we need to put more of the healthcare dollars into the purchaser's pocket. We need to give them more choice and options of where they can spend their money, because right now it's a false market. I testified in front of Representative Munson's great price transparency bill. Price transparency is part of the solution. It's a good first step. But the other part is you need to be able to choose where to go with your dollars. You need to control your dollars. So it's great to know how much all the milk costs, but if I don't know how much money I have to spend on milk and I can only go to a certain store that only carries certain kinds of milk, well, that's a problem. You don't really have choice. You have half of it.
It is funny how sort of the basic principles of economics just go out the window as soon as we start talking about healthcare. It seems like the reason for that is that the swamp is invested in becoming deeper, and they've sort of intentionally made it sort of a confusing, convoluted system.
They have, and that's everyone from the third-party administrators to the healthcare providers to the large hospitals. And your average physician, doesn't understand how any of this works, because now most physicians work for a large company.
Right.
So they just show up and a paycheck magically appears and they get to take care of patients.
Right.
I still run my business. I understand how much everything's going to cost, and I talk with patients about, look, I can look at your insurance and see where you're at in your deductible, and this is going to be very expensive, and the yield on this might be a little low, and we kind of talk through it. That's not going to happen if you go to, some big medical shop. So it's a huge problem. It has ties and tentacles into federal funding. So it is extraordinarily complex, and there's obviously huge lobbyists on the sides. But the main overriding principle should be put the dollars back in your pocket, let you choose where you shop, and then make people more in charge of their health care.
Well, speaking of letting people make decisions about their health care, we have this new vaccine mandate that's come down from the feds. If you were to become governor, how would you interact with these federal vaccine mandates?
Yeah, I don't like mandates.
Yeah.
I like suggestions. I suggest you work out an hour a day. I'm not going to mandate that you work out an hour a day.
Right.
So, the government can certainly say, hey, we're going to make these vaccines free. We're going to make them widely available. All these things. We're going to put data in front of you. But ultimately, it's your choice whether or not to get vaccinated. I hate when the federal government mandates anything for an employer, because I'm on the other end of that. I'm the person who's going to have to do this. And they did that on purpose to make the employers the bad guys in front of their employees. So I'm absolutely against that mandate. I think we should nullify it in this state.
Is there a viable way to do that, to nullify it?
Sure, you can nullify whatever you want. You just say, come and take it from, for the federal government. Now, what they're going to turn around and do is be like, okay, we'll take your money.
Right.
That's how this argument all goes, right? You can be a Second Amendment.
More of a hostage negotiation.
It is, it is, right? But this is what happens. States want federal money, and people like free things, but nothing in life is free. And so states are like, oh, look, free federal money. It's not free, buddy. They're going to be able to, you're a puppet now, and they will just manipulate your strings, and they'll tie this money to it. So whether that's education or healthcare or these grants, that's their ability to dictate what you do at a state level. So really what you want to do as a state is have as much of your funding come from your state as possible and as little from the federal government, and now you can choose what happens.
A novel concept. Governments should have positive balance sheets.
It is crazy. It's how you'd run a business, right?
Right. It seems like you've learned a lot about leadership through running your business.
Yeah.
It seems like a very key aspect of your personality.
It is, because when you actually have to make payroll and balance the checkbooks and understand how in the future are we going to get to a certain place, it turns out you learn. And if you're just a career politician who's had money magically appear out of nowhere came out of your and my pockets, but it just magically appears in the bank account. Now I get to spend it.
Right.
You're not going to have value for what that dollar is.
Right. Yeah, politicians really are in a unique circumstance where they have access to huge amounts of resources that they didn't have to personally collect. They won a popularity contest, and then they're sort of put in the driver's seat.
And they don't really pay the price for those bad decisions, because it's like, well, maybe get checked out of office. But, if you run a bad business, like, you get bankrupt. Right. And, like, you can't eat, and you lose your house. And, like, it's not the same. It's not the same risk. So you learn very quickly as a business owner, a business of any size, that you have to be careful with these things. You have to look at the future, and you have to leave a rainy day fund, and you have to plan and adjust. Yeah.
Seems like this is definitely a personal fight for you.
It is.
You care very deeply. We've covered a lot of ground. We really appreciate you coming in here. We covered some of our viewer questions. If we're going to leave our viewers with something, what would your underlying ethos be as the Minnesota governor?
Yeah, so I'm going to be someone who's always going to try to shrink the size and scope of government. I want taxes to go down. I want the government to get out of your house, out of your business, leave you alone to live your life. And government should do the basic things that it can do: provide safety, security, a justice system, empower parents to determine the best educational venue for their child. And then it should just shrink away gradually to the smallest possible type of governance that we can to do those basic fundamental tasks. That's what the framers wanted. That's what I want. That's where I'm always going to end up as my zero. And I would encourage you, if you want to follow us, to go to electneil.com, ELECTNEIL.com, or at Neil Shah MN on social before we get zucked and canceled. And then follow us and follow along, see what we're doing, read about our policies. We need dollars, delegates, volunteers.
Well, Dr. Shah,